let's bring on Alex Chamberlain to the event. Alex, good to see you, man. You're on mute.
Yeah, I didn't know if I was like in backstage, if I didn't have it muted, was I gonna interrupt? That's probably a stupid thing to think. Like you're probably in control of that. So, sorry, I was muted. Yes,
It's
hello.
good to have you, Alex. It's okay. Don't
Yeah,
apologize. All right.
thanks for
I think.
having me. I think you made a huge mistake putting me at the end,
Oh, is
because
that
now we're
right?
definitely not going to get to 10K.
Well, okay. We've got the big boys after you. Don't worry.
Okay, good.
We've got John
Who's after
Boy
me?
and Jake and Foolish Baseball
Oh
after you.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So
Wow,
I
I'm
knew there
just
might be a
like
valley. No, of course not. Chamberlain. We've all been waiting for this one. Anything that you
I'm the bar
present.
band before the big headliner.
But no, it's great having you here, and I'm just excited to see what you're going to present. So really, thanks for being here. And remember, everybody, go to the link below, go.rallyup.com, spread the news. Let's do this. We got 2 hours for $2,000. Let's raise that money for Feeding America. Thanks for
Excuse
being
me.
here, and yeah, if you want to share your screen right now, I can push it
Sure.
up.
Yeah.
Uh,
Share screen. Wow.
nice haircut,
Uh,
by the way. I'm liking
thanks.
this.
I did it yesterday. Because I was like, maybe I should be presentable. And so while I did oh, I'm getting some tea. My throat
Aw.
always hurts after doing things like this. There's my daughter.
If you've been wondering what Chamberlain has been up to, you're seeing it right there. Uh,
Raising
but
and ruining a small human. Um, yeah.
anyway, all right, take it away, Chamberlain. It's all yours.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks everyone for joining me. Yeah, I feel like it enormous mistake putting me on here at the end. I don't think this is going to be as nearly as insightful as some of the other presentations, but I did have some folks ask me about the pitch leaderboard, which is kind of my namesake at this point in terms of my contribution to the fantasy baseball world. Pitch leaderboard is a Fangraph style leaderboard, but with Statcast data, and you can kind of see a little screenshot of what the leaderboard looks like there. And so anyone who's been to hopefully, I mean, I guess if you're watching this, you've probably been to Fangraphs, but if you've never been to Fangraphs, a Fangraphs leaderboard looks, night mode. Night mode's pretty sexy, right, guys? It's pretty good. Let me put it onto a classic mode here. This is what a leaderboard looks like on Fangraphs. And so you have line by line each player and a whole slew of stats that you can look at. That can be filtered on any date range or year range. There's some splits. You can look by positions, all sorts of different metrics from advanced, such as like, I don't know, BABIP for pitchers. You're going to look at like the ERA estimators like FIP and XFIP, and then you have batted ball data, plate discipline data, pretty much the usual stuff that you might use. We also have a StatCast tab now. I say we because I write for Fangraphs. I don't know if that was a known fact here among people who are watching. So I tried to make a leaderboard that used this kind of aesthetic in terms of presenting data, but relying on StatCast data instead, because that was not something that really existed at the time that I was starting to work on this. StatCast has a couple of different leaderboards where they have expected metrics, and they're adding different stuff. They have like a leaderboard specific to spin axis and spin efficiency now. So that's interesting in its own right. But they have a lot of disparate and disconnected leaderboards, where it'd be really nice to be able to see a pitcher's spin efficiency right next to his metrics, his stats for the year or for a specific pitch. So I wanted to create that tool. That was the whole purpose of this. But it really, I can't claim that this was my idea originally, because I was first originally inspired by Baseball Prospectus, which has its own pitch leaderboard. And I'm not sure anyone who, someone probably knows about it. You may know about it, but I don't ever hear anyone talking about this. So I feel like this is one of those underutilized tools that kind of just lurks in the corner of the fantasy baseball world. And this has always existed. This has existed for several years. And it has a lot of the stuff that I was just talking about in terms of what the pitch leaderboard does, which is present line by line stats for each player, but also for specific pitches as well. So Diego Castillo here on the second line, this is a leaderboard of all fastballs, and right now it's sorted by average velocity. So Diego Castillo has the second fastest average fastball in 2019. So this is kind of like where the genesis of this whole project came from. But this leaderboard drives me crazy because it's really hard to use, and there's just not a lot of flexibility. And no disrespect to Baseball Prospectus, even though it may have just sounded like I disrespected them, but it's a really powerful tool, but a little bit hard to use. So I was trying to just synthesize the best of all worlds, which is Fangraphs, Baseball Prospectus, and StatCast at the same time. Right, I must have gotten this idea from somewhere, and I just kind of presented that it came from Baseball Prospectus. But like, what caused me to actually do this? Like, typically, I'm a really lazy person. I'm not very motivated, frankly. Like, it's really hard to get me to do something that is not absolutely necessary to do. But I was writing a feature on Kevin Gausman, of all people, and I think this was in 2017. And this was when, let me think about the context here. It was probably like the first 2 months of 2017, and he was maybe the worst starting pitcher in baseball at the time. And tell me if you've heard that one before. But with that in mind, I was like, okay, so Gausman has like a 6.5 ERA through his first 10 starts. From June onward, he had like a 3.23 ERA in his last 18 starts. And that coincided with him ramping up his slider usage. This is all before his splitter is kind of driving his success. So I was like, hell yeah, this is really cool that and this is like back when I'm like just starting to really get into pitcher analysis. And frankly, I don't know if I still know all that much about pitcher analysis, but really understanding and making the connection that Kevin Gausman's success was being fueled by his increased slider usage. Now, at the time, I think his slider was generating like a 19% swinging strike rate. And I thought that was incredible. In 2017, it's funny how far the sport has come, but in 2017, the league average swinging strike rate was like 10%. Now it's like 12 or something crazy, but it was like 10%. So in my head, I'm like, this slider is twice as good as the league average pitch. But also intuitively, as someone who watches baseball, who has played baseball, I knew that breaking pitches are probably better than fastballs or other types of pitches at inducing whiffs. So with that knowledge, or not even knowledge, with that intuition in mind, I wanted to try to figure out how I could validate that. And I had no way of doing that. There was nowhere in anything that I looked for that could tell me that this was the league average swinging strike rate for sliders in 2017 or in 2016. So because I'm not good at the internet, I literally copy pasted all of the data from each view of the Baseball Prospectus leaderboard. So like fastballs, curves, changeups, every single pitch by every single split for every year. It took me like hours and hours across several days to do this. It was the dumbest thing. I probably could have learned how to do web scraping through like Python or something and done it much faster. But instead I did it this way because brute force is just the way to go, I guess. It's cooler now. And I took all the data and I calculated everything, and I found out the hard way after writing the post and publishing it and paying a bunch of lip service to Kevin Gausman's slider that the league average swinging strike rate for a slider was like 17%. So Kevin Gausman's slider was not significantly above average in terms of inducing whiffs in 2017, but at least I was on the right track. I thought I was like, this is at least a good kind of tangent to go on because I just learned something new today. Like, obviously a 19% strikeout or swinging strike rate for a pitch is good compared to the league average, but compared to other sliders, it's nearly average, maybe just a little above average in terms of inducing whiffs, and not even getting into the whole issue with contact quality and contact management. So I kind of pursued this thread, and I have all this data kind of to my disposal now, and so I was goofing off with other tools. This was something before the leaderboard where I had a tool where you could pick two different metrics to compare side by side. This is ground ball rate across the x-axis and swinging strike rate across the y-axis. And I used this to try to identify pitchers who had interesting combinations of traits and characteristics. You can see Steven Strasburg right here in the top right corner has one of the highest, this is in 2017, this is really old data, and this is with only PitchFX, but has one of the highest ground ball rates and swinging strike rates combined for any pitch. Now, I don't need to tell you that Steven Strasburg is really good. I don't need to tell you that Kershaw's slider is good, or that Kluber's slider has the highest swinging strike rate in 2017 when he was a Cy Young caliber pitcher for half a decade. But, interesting seeing something like Tanaka's splitter up in the corner when Nick Pollock denounces splitters, and also seeing like Pineda's slider, Jacob Fria's changeup, Robbie Ray's slider, like just learning new things quickly about pitchers that, frankly, like I didn't have the context or even the know-how to evaluate at the time. And this is just 3 or 4 years ago. So this was a really good starting point for me. But PitchFX was kind of the tip of the iceberg, and really I needed an excuse to jump into StatCast data. So I was like, what did I say here? But then I was like, what if I could make a leaderboard like the BP one, but with more functionality, and maybe finally I have a reason to dive into StatCast data. Oh my God, it's so daunting. It is daunting. Have you ever downloaded StatCast data? You can only download 40,000 lines at a time. And I say only because there are more than 700,000 lines of data per year. So, if you download all the StatCast data starting from 2015 to now, you have close to 4 million lines of data. So it's a terrifying ordeal and endeavor to kind of pursue, but it's something I wanted to pursue, and I really wanted to kind of see this to fruition. So where's my mouse? It's here. So again, like why this is not a waste of space, and the feature of this is that it provides StatCast data in the form, of a Fangraph style leaderboard. It is pitch level data, which offers the leaderboard immense flexibility. You can easily compare pitches within and across pitch types. So I can compare sliders to sliders, but also sliders to fastballs to changeups. I can look at an entire pitcher's arsenal in one leaderboard if I choose to do so. And because of the line-by-line flexibility of StatCast, I can do very specific date range filters. I can do splits like crazy, baseball splits. I'm not very flexible. And we can also look at pitchers and hitters. I think some people use StatCast very intently for one or the other and not necessarily both. And it took me a little bit, but I was able to get both pitchers and hitters into the pitch leaderboard. So you can see not only pitch performance by pitchers, but you can see it by hitters too, if you're the kind of person who looks at Jose Ramirez's splits against fastballs, or Luis Robert's splits against breaking balls in 2020, if you want to go look at it, that kind of thing. So that was the whole impetus. And without wasting any more time, I want to kind of get into the good. So let's go do a tour. Let's do a tour of the pitch leaderboard. So that's not it. This is it. Is it going to refresh on me? Yeah, of course it is. Look, I know if you use the pitch leaderboard, I know that it refreshes, and I know that it drives you crazy. While it's refreshing, have I missed any questions? I see there's one. Did Alex's skin turn blue? That's not quite what we're going for, but I hope the answer is no. I'm guessing it's because of my shirt. I've got a nice little dry fit shirt here, Blue Jays. My wife got it for me. I think it was on sale. It's very comfortable. Absolutely a Blue Jays bandwagoner, shameless bandwagoner. It's going to be a White Sox Padres World Series. Anyway, so we're back. Here's the pitch leaderboard, and the dashboard tab has some basic stuff. I kind of created this because Matt Eddy, I think specifically at Baseball America, if I'm remembering this correctly, was like, this is awesome, but can I just get the basic stuff like batting average and on base percentage? I was like, yeah, of course. So it has slash line, it has weighted on base average WOBA, and StatCast expected WOBA or xWOBA on the far right. We have strikeouts, unintentional walks, total pitches, etc. Some kind of high level stuff that we all like to look at, both at a pitch level and at a player level. But two of my favorite metrics on this dashboard specifically are usage. And so this is a nice little quick shorthand for knowing how often a player throws that pitch in a given year, or in a given date range if you're not looking at the whole year. And we'll get into filters in a little bit, and parameters. But you can see here that Tyler Glasnow threw his four-seamer 60% of the time last year. Lance Lynn 52% of the time. But I think more importantly, and nicely to pair with usage, is the column right next to it, which is two-strike percentage. And this is the frequency that this pitch is thrown specifically in a two-strike count. And this is something that I became more attuned to in recent years in terms of a pitcher optimizing his arsenal. You know, if you are a pitcher who has a bad fastball and or a good breaking pitch, you probably want to see that pitcher favoring his better offerings in counts where the hitter is more vulnerable. And so just quickly looking here, you can see, like, yeah, Marco Gonzalez's sinker, great pitch. He throws it 45% of the time in total, but 36% of the time specifically in two-strike counts. Dinelson Lamet, 53% of the time for his slider. His primary pitch is a slider, throws it 65% of the time in two-strike counts. So he goes full Corbin, and so does Corbin, for that matter. Corbin goes full Corbin. So that's just something that I threw in here that I like specifically. So we'll keep moving on to specs, and specs is a kind of like a pitcher specific leaderboard, in that it is describing the specifications and physical characteristics of as I watch the spinning wheel of death here, the physical characteristics of a pitch, and that includes, this is killing me, not responsive. Yeah, we're gonna wait. I need to close out of some tabs here. I can't believe I'm doing this to you right now. There we go. So specs. So we're talking about velocity, we're talking about spin rate, we're talking about extension, release points, movement, but also some things that are a little bit newer. Like all that spin stuff that I was talking about, I got it uploaded into the pitch leaderboard. So you can look at here in the fourth column, a pitcher's active spin rate as a percentage. You can see right next to that his measured spin axis and his inferred spin axis, and you can see the degrees difference between those two axis measurements. And this is something, again, that is kind of new, and we're all talking about all of a sudden, alongside seam shifted wake, which was one of the previous presentations that was conducted with the guy who coined the term, I think, or is one of the people who helped coin the term. But it's nice to be able to have this data right next to everything else, which is one of the things that I've been dying for and working on, as I've, again, the whole genesis of the idea was to try to get all the StatCast data side by side, and make it accessible so you can be looking at a pitcher's active spin percentage and then go straight over to his batted ball metrics or his plate discipline and see how that has panned out over a given period of time. And then a couple of other metrics on the far right that I really like are approach angle. And this is something that is talked about much more in depth and much more knowledgeably in scouting circles, and especially in research and development circles. So like if you follow Driveline or any guys who work at Driveline, they're talking about vertical approach angle or horizontal approach angle, primarily vertical approach angle, and especially how it relates to fastball effectiveness. You also see people evaluating college players also talk about it. And this is because they're collecting all that data firsthand. This data isn't in StatCast. I actually had to calculate this based on an algorithm that came from Alan Nathan. So this is something that theoretically you can't find anywhere else. At least to my knowledge, if you're trying to look on StatCast, you're not going to find it, but you can find it here. So that is one way in that this pitch leaderboard is not a waste of space. So that's nice. That's nice that it's not a waste of space. But I also have two different variations of approach angle, and that controls for pitch height. And so vertical approach angle is biased naturally by a pitch's pitch height. Tyler Glasnow can throw theoretically the same fastball at the top of the zone and the bottom of the zone, and it will naturally read as two different vertical approach angles just based on the trajectory of the pitch coming through the zone. It might be much flatter at the top of the zone just based on him throwing it 7 or 8 or 9 feet, in the air, wherever his crazy release point is, and it crossing the zone the top of the zone, very horizontally, as opposed to the bottom of the zone where coming from up here and going down to your knees is naturally going to have a steeper decline down to the bottom of the zone. And though you can see my stupid hand example here that these are naturally different angles, this is the approach angle as it crosses home plate. So I adjusted for this. I accounted for this natural difference in approach angle that is kind of biasing these readings that we have here. So I actually prefer to use adjusted vertical approach angle, and that's that. And I realize I'm halfway through my presentation now, so I'm going to kind of try to speed it along here so I can get to some questions if there are any. There haven't been any comments in 4 minutes. As someone said, that's my Wi-Fi right now too. So hopefully everyone is still actually here and not all having Wi-Fi issues. The next tab is the plate discipline tab. This is one of my favorite ones to use. It's not my actual favorite, but it's probably my second favorite as it loads. Oh, cool.
Well, I'll pop in really quickly
Extremely cool.
to say that we just got a couple $100 donations.
Nick, are you hopping back on? Are you going to keep me company while this thing takes a long time
to
load?
Yes, a great moment to remind everybody that we're getting closer and closer to our goal. We're almost there. I think we're about 1,700 short at the moment. So we have an hour and a half to get there. You guys are doing great. Thank you so much for supporting this 4-day event that we've had, and of course for Feeding America. So yeah, carry on. It looks like it refreshed. You got this, Alex. Good presentation.
Okay, we'll get there. Let's get to 10, guys.
Yeah,
come on.
Let's do it.
Don't let me hold us back. Don't let me hold us back.
You do nothing of the sort, Alex. Come on.
So plate discipline is probably my favorite tab to look at, and it has, again, this is all of the typical metrics that we use to evaluate kind of pitcher performance, at least under the hood. Obviously, we use ERA and WHIP and ERA estimators to evaluate pitcher performance, strikeouts, walks, home run rates. These are all outcomes, but what are the intermediate outcomes? Those are plate appearance outcomes, but these are pitch outcomes. And we focus strongly on contact rates, on swinging strike rates, on called strike rates. And if you're a pitcher list enthusiast, CSW rates, which is swinging strikes called strikes plus whiffs. And that is a metric that I have here in the 8th column. Pitcher list doesn't even have it. Nick. So right now, I think technically I own this metric.
That's not
so
true.
It's mine.
We have that. We have it.
No.
Yeah,
you do. Is it up now?
Yeah. We launched it with 6.0.
Okay, right. Of course. I was just assuming that I've had a monopoly on this forever, so
yeah,
I
know. And
all right, so I'm going to give it back to you. This is actually me. This is the ceremony of me handing CSW back to you. But we have CSW here. If you want to look at it quickly alongside a bunch of other metrics, I really like whiffs per swing as opposed to swinging strike rate, which is out of all pitches. And then I think Alex Fast's favorite metric, aside obviously from CSW, is true first strike rate. And so the F strike rate here is a reflection of true first strikes in that it omits balls in play, because technically a ball in play does not count. It doesn't count as a ball, certainly, so it helps the strike rate there. But if you get rid of those, you have a better idea of what is the frequency that a pitcher gets to a 0-1 count as opposed to a 1-0 count, and not looking at instances in which the ball is put into play. And then some other metrics that I've more recently added that may have slipped under the radar because I'm not always good at announcing these things is the attack zones. And this is something that StatCast more recently added to their search function as well. You have the heart of the zone, the shadow, and the shadow hugs the edge of the zone. It's both just inside and just outside the true edge of the zone. And then you have chase and waste. And this is also a really interesting way of divvying up the zone, especially if you have a fundamental understanding of how hitters perform in each of these zones. Hitter WOBA, their productive performance in the heart of the zone is significantly better than in the shadow, and definitely in the chase and waste parts of the zone. And a pitcher is truly maximizing his strikeout minus walk potential by living in the shadows of the zone. So just looking at these kinds of things, seeing who is throwing their fastball in the heart of the zone too much, who is spotting their changeup perfectly, most often in the shadows of the zone. I'm talking almost specifically about like Mike Pineda in the former and Kyle Hendricks in the latter. These kinds of things, just again from a high level, can give you a lot of information about what kind of pitcher this person is, just based on this location stuff. And I'm very enthusiastic about pitch location at this point, but not really in a heat map sense. Question for Alex: what is the origin of your Twitter handle? Very, very pertinent question, as I'm in the middle of this presentation about nothing of the sort, Yancey Eaton, but my Twitter handle is a very obscure reference to a very old Flash internet cartoon called Homestar Runner that formed or was created in like 2002, which is absolutely insane to think about at this point. You're probably familiar with like Trogdor, the Burninator, the dragon. He's got a beefy arm on the back of his neck. That was Homestar Runner. And Dolph Haldhagen is he teaches battle axe lessons at the rec center. Presumably he's Nordic or German. And he teaches battle axe lessons at the rec center. So that's cool. Strong Bad is one of the characters in the cartoon, and he takes those battle axe lessons. Definitely doesn't go to swim practice. He takes battle axe lessons. So that's where that came from. And of course I chose that handle before I thought, had any concept of what I would actually be doing on Twitter. And now I've kind of stuck in this pickle in which I have the dumbest Twitter handle, and a mildly important role in the fantasy baseball world. So, moving on to the I do not have a battle axe, unfortunately. The system is down. Thank you. See, we got some. Eddie No Pants. Yeah, I mean, people don't know who Homestar Runner is. It's or Strong Bad. I think some people know who Strong Bad is, and obviously people remember Trogdor. But it's I feel like it's a increasingly small or decreasingly small. Oh boy. Well, anyway, we're a shrinking group of folks who fondly remember Homestar Runner, and it was such a specific time in the internet, and now we have like TikTok and stuff, and I feel so old. I feel so old now. So I can't draw a dragon. I mean, I can draw a dragon the way that Strong Bad draws a dragon. 2 S's, consummate V's. Stop distracting me. So I'm going to go to the batted ball event tab, which is BBE. That's what that stands for. That's kind of StatCast's taxonomy for batted ball events or for balls in play. Of course, it's going to take like an hour to load. And I'll just play spoiler here. And this tab has all sorts of information about exit velocity, launch angles, maximum EV, hard hit rate, barrel rate, flares, solid contact, poor contact, fly balls, ground balls. There you go. You can see it now. Average launch angle. And 2 of my favorites on here are exclusives. Sorry, 3 on here are exclusives. Some made by me, some made by others. We have dynamic hard hit rate, made by Connor Kirkon, who might be one of the most, or maybe the most underrated mind in terms of fantasy baseball. And I don't know if he really considers himself a fantasy baseball person. He's just like a curious baseball mind who is quite good at what he does, and just kind of has like a natural intuition for data. So dynamic hard hit rate is kind of this idea that a hitter has a natural limitation of, or a natural limit to his his exit velocity capacity at certain extreme angles. Like it's easier to hit a 115 mile per hour ball at like a 25-degree angle than it is at like a 50-degree angle straight in the sky, or like, I guess, a negative 50-degree angle straight into the ground. And even though those hits, they're not hits, but those balls in play are probably outs, they were well struck at such extreme angles that it can tell us a lot about the productive capacity of that player. And kind of the inspirational moment for Kirkon was Joey Gallo hitting like a 60-degree pop-up at 108 miles per hour, like something that no one else can do. And so obviously that sucks. Like someone's going to catch that. It's going to be an out. It's not going to show up as a barrel because it's not within the productive range of launch angles, but he's doing something that literally no one else can do. And it's a testament to the kind of power that he can put on display at more optimal angles. So that's what DHH does. It gives credit where credit is due, where barrel fails to give credit, frankly. The metric next to it is blast. I wrote a post about this recently. Blast is basically the more productive subset of barrels. And there are a lot of examples where we found that barrels are not created equal. This is because it has a minimum launch or exit velocity threshold of 95 miles per hour. So we're treating, hits balls in play at 95 miles per hour and 115 miles per hour the same, basically, when they really shouldn't be. So blast is just a smaller subset of barrels. They are significantly more productive, and they are just as descriptive and predictive as regular barrels. So I think kind of comparing and contrasting these rates, especially for hitters, is really interesting because you can see pretty clearly that like someone like Mookie Betts, really he barrels up the ball well, but doesn't hit a lot of blasts. So he's like really just kind of scraping by in terms of his productive capacity when hitting the ball hard. I think Jose Ramirez is kind of in that area as well. Whereas if you look at someone like Kyle Schwarber or Luke Voigt, those guys are blasting everything. And that's kind of like what you'd expect when we talk about these guys, right? That's a little bit of intuition playing into this. So I don't intend for blast to be something that's groundbreaking, but it certainly is an interesting and helpful way of splitting apart and parsing that data. And Justin Choi, who writes for somewhere on Medium, he used to write for Prospects 365, I think, looked at Nick Castellanos recently, and he's like the poster boy for guy who kind of consistently underperforms his ex-WOBA, and that's because he is a guy who barrels up the ball a lot, but doesn't blast the ball a lot. And maybe it's more like 50-50, but still it's really overselling his productive capacity by just looking at barrels instead of both blasts and what I like to call weak barrels, which is just the other half of barrels that aren't blasts. So there are a lot of good opportunities to use that. I think I see a question here is the goal of I've seen a little bit on this, but how much are you using blast now with the deadened ball? I think that's from Mikey from the previous presentation. I don't want to claim that like using blast versus barrels will be a perfect indicator of the type of hitter who might fall off with a deadened ball, but I do think it might be an untapped resource in terms of trying to identify who those hitters might be. Certainly, like if you have someone like Jose Ramirez who not coincidentally had a falling off when the ball was deadened in 2018, a guy who really steepened his launch angle and really started selling out for power despite not having that natural power to his name, really was selling out for that power. And then in 2018, when the dead ball came, his BABIP cratered. And, I'm not going to go looking at his spray charts, but I can only imagine that all of these fastballs these fly balls, that were hit with a juicier ball were now dying with the deadened ball. And he went almost a full calendar year with this issue. And I know it bled over into 2019, but this is kind of the risk that you run when you're someone who does not have natural power, but kind of optimizes their swing in such a way that they are able to hit home runs, and especially if they're pulling the ball, kind of like Alex Bregman, someone who doesn't have a lot of power, someone whose Statcast percentiles, if you're a percentile person, are a lot of blue and not a lot of red, but still very productive because when he does put the ball into play, which is very frequently because he has pristine plate discipline, he's really making the most of it by pulling the ball and just kind of like squeaking him out, so to speak. But I think he, especially with his slump last year, he and these kinds of fringier guys in terms of power are definitely going to be the ones who fall off. And again, that's just intuitive based on this dead and ball premise. But I think you'll see like Kyle Schwarber and Luke Voigt and those kinds of guys, Tatis, Nelson Cruz, my boy Nelson Cruz, are all going to be fine, I think, because they're really hitting no doubters. Like if you want to just equate blast to no doubters, that is effectively what you're doing. So, right. So yeah, woo Justin. What was the goal of downloading the data essentially to remove looking at that circle? Yes, we'll get back to that question. And you're jumping the gun here, but yes, there is a way to download the leaderboard so you do not have to deal with the refreshing and the loading. We will get that we will get to that, in a sec. And then there's one last tab that is leaderboard-esque, and that is the X stats. And I figured because we're all fantasy baseball people that we really like our X stats. We like our FIPs and our XFIPs and our Sierras. We like our XWOBAs. We like our deserved strikeout rates and our deserved walk rates. Once upon a time, I made a deserved barrel rate, and that's here, although I admit that I don't really like it anymore. And that's because blasts are better than deserved barrels, both descriptively and predictively, I think. So I think there's probably a time and place for deserved barrels, but I'm inclined to remove it because I have just been using blasts instead, frankly. So if you're someone who uses deserved barrels, you have my blessing to not use them anymore. But I'm also not going to stop you. We have some ERA estimators here that also can't be found anywhere else. Last year, I created a deserved ERA, and the premise of that was to find the most descriptive ERA estimator. Each ERA estimator has like a varying degree of descriptive and predictive ability, and really there's a trade-off there. So an ERA estimator that is more descriptive will naturally be, a lot of burps today. Oh, that was a good one. Less predictive. And I'm talking about FIP compared to XFIP and Sierra, and those latter two are less descriptive but more predictive. And so I wanted to get towards something that was most descriptive, and that has its own kind of usefulness because clearly if it's most descriptive, it's going to be less predictive, or specifically least predictive. But I really wanted to narrow in on getting to the bottom of what exactly should have happened based on the outcomes that transpired, as opposed to being like, well, there were strikeouts and walks and home runs, which is what FIP does. There's a lot of other things that are transpiring that are not being accounted for in FIP. And I wanted to be like, let's just account for everything. Like, let's account for the BABIP that's too high, whatever. Let's account for the strand rate that's too low. Let's account for, every other element that's actually transpiring on the field, and let's just put them into an ERA estimate. Like, I just want to know what should have happened based on what we've observed. So that's what deserved ERA is, and that's why it's so descriptive, is because it is honing in on exactly what should have happened, and it has the highest explanation of variance in ERA, and suggests that pitching is still like 20% luck. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I also created barrel FIP. Truthfully, I don't know how I feel about that, but FIP is strikeouts, walks, and home runs. XFIP is strikeouts, walks, and fly balls, with an expectation that fly ball percentage will yield kind of a league average rate of home runs per fly ball. And barrel FIP was just kind of that same premise where I said, let's replace fly balls with barrels, and then assume that those barrels will yield a league average rate of barrels per home run. So that's what barrel FIP is. People ask me this all the time, and I just kind of like put it on there one day and I didn't write a post about it. But barrel FIP is saying, yeah, strikeouts is a skill, walks is a skill, barrels allowed is a skill. And that has actually been proven by Connor Kirkon, is that barrels allowed by a pitcher is, in theory, I guess it's not a skill, a trait. I mean, if you're allowing barrels, it's not really a skill. It's like the opposite of a skill, but it's something that the pitcher owns. Let's put it that way. They own that trait. And that is kind of what CRA does too, and that's Connor Kirkon's metric as well. CRA is classified run average, and it uses strikeouts, walks, and barrels, but in a much more like rigorous way. And it actually is the most, well, I've seen some other ERA metrics out there, but it is one of the most predictive ERA estimators. It's more predictive than FIP, XFIP, Sierra, etc. So we have CRA here as well. Connor writes for 6-man rotation. Just to be clear, he writes like once every 3 months, and each one is a banger. So you got to be reading his stuff. You got to follow him on Twitter. Again, we got ex-Wobicon here, and then I have my deserved strikeout and walk rates that I base on pitcher plate discipline. And so finally getting to my favorite tab is the splits tab. And this is like the quickest and easiest way to look at pitcher data, like digging straight into their arsenal and looking at very key StatCast metrics. Loading. Of course it's loading. Let me get to like the next part of my presentation here while we're waiting for it to load. All right. Okay, cool. So that's next. That's exciting. And so I created a splits tab, but really it's like a player profile tab that contains splits if you want to look at it. But you can see here that you can just look at every pitch in a pitcher's arsenal. You can see the usage, you can see the velocity, you can see the movement and the approach angles, the contact management skills here in this middle portion, the key exit velocity and launch angle metrics, swinging strike rate. Darvish has nearly 5 pitches with a 15% swinging strike rate or higher. Ground ball rate, blast rates. He looks like he probably allowed 1 blast last year on his cutter, and he just got zeros. There's zeros down the line. And so, again, you can use this to just look at a pitcher's arsenal, and that's what I do. But you can also, if you're a splits person, in this drop-down, look at first half splits, second half splits, catcher by count, home road, lefty-righty by month, and then if he's a swing man, you have starter and reliever. So now that I'm running out of breath here, and time, I want to get into a couple of quick tips that people might not be aware of. So there is a group by function on the corner of each of the main tabs, and that allows you to choose either pitch specific data, and that again is player and pitch. That's what you see here. It's like Lance Lynn's fastball, Antonio Senzatella's four-seamer, Cole's four-seamer, or you can group it by player only. So if you're actually looking for whole player performance and you don't really care to use this leaderboard for pitch specific metrics, you can still use it in that regard. You can use it just like a Fangraphs leaderboard, where you look at each player's overall performance for plate discipline, for batted ball metrics, for his physical specifications on his pitches, which probably doesn't look good when rolled up at the pitcher level because everything moves and behaves so differently. But and then also like the expected metrics. So you can do both of these for pitchers and for hitters. You can toggle between pitchers and hitters and see not only pitcher performance at the overall level or by the pitch level, but also for hitters. So you can see toggling between pitchers and hitters. You go from Lance Lynn, Shane Bieber, Herman Marquez to Jose, Carlos, Francisco, Biggio, Muncy. And of course, you can combine these, which is really the very critical element. Like if you want to see Cavan Biggio, Brandon Nimmo, Cesar Hernandez, a performance against four-seamers, you got it right there too. So use these liberally, because this is like one of the things that I think people don't even realize they can do. And then of course you can look at performance across seasons. I have up to 2017 in here, so you can have 2017 through 2020 in aggregate. So you can have Verlander's fastball since the start of 2017, or you can split them all up using that last drop down, the split seasons drop down, where you can see that R.A. Dickey threw 2,300 knuckleballs in 2017. And that's going to be the highest pitch count of any pitch in any season. But Kevin Gausman right behind him in 2017 with his four-seamer. We got Verlander throwing his four-seamer a lot. Same with Lance Lynn. And those are, again, all individual season performances. But wait, there's more. There's a couple of extra tabs. We have the splits tab. I already went over that. But we have the benchmarks tab. And this again, like I gave this long origin story at the beginning. And this is the actual fruit that tree bore. Which is that I really wanted to know what the league average metrics where every pitch type was. So if you ever need references, I think this is a really good, like a kind of a good reference or a resource for people who are writing about any kind of pitcher. Yeah, let's go. 1,300 more. Don't let me stop you. Wow, lost my train of thought though. If you're writing about a pitcher and you do not know what the league average rate of such and such is, the blast percentage or the barrel percentage or the ground ball percentage for a certain pitch type, these are all things that you can find on the StatCatch search function. And again, like I don't want to pretend like this is doing something that other resources can't do, but you can find all of this very quickly and not have to hassle over using the search function, which is truthfully difficult, especially for someone who is maybe not so familiar with advanced metrics and definitely like is kind of diving into all of this for the first time. Like I would be terrified of having to figure out where to go and how to interpret all this information. 5 straight minutes of R.A. Dickey knuckleball stats. We'll see how much time we have left. There have been a couple of performances. I keep saying performances, but I mean presentations about rolling average graphs. I think Toby Batflip Crazy, who is kind of like the figurehead of the rolling average graph movement, someone who I'm jealous of making that his namesake because it's so brilliant. It's definitely an underutilized tool, but I wanted to do that for pitches too, because we always look at that for again, we look at that for whole player performance. We look at how a pitcher has performed over the last 5 games or how a hitter has performed over the last 30 games. You can see individual pitches and see if they are tailing off or improving. Yu Darvish's rolling swinging strike rate on his cutter seemed to tail off there near the end of the season, but you can see where it's peaked. You can see how all of his other pitches are doing side by side, but you can also look at more than just swinging strike rate. You can look at movement. You can look at extension. You can look at a bunch of physical characteristics of pitches to see if there's anything different happening. And that's kind of how I was clued into Yu Darvish's change in the middle of 2019 when he stopped sucking. It wasn't because of his cutter, because he threw his cutter all year. It's because he changes his extension, his release point at home plate. And I think it was just, it's crazy to think that the guy had the yips, but I think he legitimately had the yips. And once he got that kind of like that physical relationship with his pitches, God, it's been a long day. I don't think he has physical relationships with his pitches, but Gannon, I'm sorry. So there's a question here about the league averages. I'll go back, but there's a benchmarks tab, and you can see all the league averages for each pitch here by 20 or so different metrics. And you can see based on starters and relievers, and then also by year. And so that's just like the 6th tab here. Hopefully it won't refresh, but you can see right here, the benchmarks tab. I'm going to click it, but it's just going to take a crap. That's how you can see all that. And I think that's, humbly, but not so humbly, I think that is a nice resource for people who are writing about these kinds of things. And anyway, you can look at rolling performances for pitchers, and you can pick any pitcher, you can pick any metric, and see how those things have changed. Again, specifically for pitch types, which I think is something that you don't really see anywhere else. And some other side projects, and I only got like 5 minutes, but I have like a hitter comps and pitch comps thing that I'm working on, and you can pick different metrics for hitters and see other hitters who compare favorably. In this example here, Teoscar Hernandez compares favorably to Marcell Ozuna, to Nelson Cruz, to breakout year Jorge Soler to peak Matt Olson, Chris Davis, Josh Donaldson, Kyle Schwarber kind of stuff. So like that's not bad, right? And I think one of my favorite ones that I have here is the pitch comps, which is it's its own battle. We seem to have a lot of preferences and a lot of analysis about pitches and how their physical makeup affects their performance, but we don't have a lot of concrete analysis or maybe empirics on what is true about these things. What I mean by that is is adding velocity to someone's fastball necessarily good for that specific pitcher? Moreover, we're trying to get to, is specific pitch performance bankable or reliable or sticky from year to year? You might see a pitcher whose fastball suddenly stopped sucking in 2020. Was that an ownable or bankable improvement in skills, or was that luck? It's really hard to know sometimes because these samples are so small. I mean, 6 months of pitching data is already a small sample, even though it doesn't feel like it. Splitting that into individual pitches is worse, and even worse to do so for only 2 months. So I like to use my pitch comps tool, and I'll include a link for this later if there's an email for it, or you can find me on Twitter and I can send you the link to it. Excuse me. But I like to use the pitch comps to kind of get a feel for if a pitch should have actually performed that way. And the comps are created by looking at a pitch's velocity, spin rate, movement, release points, like as much physical information as I can collect about a pitch, I will use it. And it will create the score purely on those components and not on any of the performance components. So you can see that comparing Kyle Hendricks' changeup, all of its closest comps are Kyle Hendricks' changeup. Like that's good. Like that means it's working. Also Tyler Clippard's changeup, Zach Davies' changeup, and Zach Davies is also a great contact management pitcher by way of his changeup, although not all the time. And so, I know that Kyle Hendricks is a good contact management pitcher, but I can use this tool and say, look at all these changeups that were just like Hendricks' changeup. How did they perform? Tyler Clippard's changeup was excellent. Jeremy Hellickson's changeup in 2018 was excellent. Zach Davies' changeup has been mostly excellent, except in 2017. You can see there's 2 metrics here: EV influence and LA influence. That is the amount of influence on a hitter's exit velocity and launch angle that they all exhibit. They're all decreasing a hitter's exit velocity by like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 miles per hour. And that's a huge deal if you're facing someone like Mike Trout, who's going to smoke everything, and not a huge deal if you're facing Malik Smith. But if you have a pitch that can organically reduce a hitter's exit velocity by 7 miles per hour, that's a big deal. And so I use pitch comps as a way to kind of weed out the signal from the noise. And I encourage you to go look at Trevor Bauer's fastball from 2020 if you have a moment to go use the pitch comp tool. So we're getting to the end. Some lingering questions you may have. I have 2 minutes. Looks like we hit 10K. Awesome. We got a 1,500 donor. I don't know why it happened during my thing. Very quickly, you can download the data. You can download the entire data set, all 25 or 2.5 million lines of data. That sounds like an awful idea, but you can download each tab of the leaderboard as the leaderboard itself. So you can just basically take a screenshot of that leaderboard, but have it in an Excel file if you this the cross-tab button here. And so in the bottom right-hand corner, of each tab, you have a download button. I really hope that this doesn't lag because I don't have a lot of time to spare. We got the good Alex. Yeah. God, can you imagine if Alex Fast was doing this? They would probably be withdrawing donations right now. Good Lord. That guy thinks he can go on ESPN and MLB Network and be all cool, be all special, and everyone's gonna like him. We don't. I love Alex, and he's got a lot of great ideas. He just, there can only be one Alex. It's not going to load, but in the bottom right-hand corner of each tab, there is a button, and you can see it here. Possibly, maybe I can give it a quick zoom. Yeah, whoa, in the bottom right corner, we have this download button. Here, click that, and it gives you two options. Well, it gives you a lot of options. I encourage anyone to download it as a PDF because it probably is an awful experience to use the leaderboard as a PDF. But you can download it as a crosstab, and a crosstab is exactly what you're looking at. It is the leaderboard, but in an Excel format. And then if you also want to use the leaderboard as it is, with all of its functionality intact, you can download it as a Tableau workbook. And to use it offline, to use it on your desktop, to not have to deal with these refreshing issues, which I know is an issue. That's just kind of how Tableau is. You can download Tableau Workbook and then go to Tableau Reader. Google Tableau Reader. It is a free download of Tableau software where you can't edit the dashboard, but you can use it and interact with it exactly the way you would on Google. So going back to my presentation, use Tableau Reader. Google that. Yeah, interrupt me. I'm sorry. I'm done. Anything else? We made it to 10. You're muted.
Hey, I've been doing this maybe for 4 days. I don't know. You made it happen, Alex. Thank you so much for being a part of this, guys. You should be checking out Chamberlain's Pitch Leaderboard if you're not already. You're doing it wrong. Unbelievable amounts of information. Pretty much a dream for all of us. So thanks a lot for making that and showing it off today.
Yeah, thanks for letting me use 61 minutes of your time. Sorry for wasting it. But I'm glad we made it to 10,000. That's awesome.
We did.
I'm honored that it happened during my train wreck of a